Here we
The
go.
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Perret. This is the May 23rd Research Committee webinar open to the public, and we'll be talking about return on investment. The title of our webinar today is How Does AR Impact Your Organization's Bottom Line? I'm the chair of the Research Committee, and I'm the president of Perret Research and Consulting. Today I have with me some experts that are going to be presenting. Chris Ambrosio is the Vice President of Consulting at Strategy Analytics. Paul Davies is Associate Technical Fellow at Boeing. And Jay Kim is Chief Strategy Officer at Upskill. Paul Davies is also the President of the area, and Jay Kim is our Vice President of the Provider segment. So I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, and you'll all be on mute. However, if you'd like to introduce any questions, you can use the chat function in the GoToWebinar interface. Thank you. And Chris, I'd like to go to the next slide. For those of you who may be new to the AR for Enterprise Alliance, we're the only global membership-funded alliance. It's a nonprofit, and we're set up to accelerate the adoption of enterprise augmented reality. And we do that by supporting the growth of a comprehensive ecosystem. Next slide, please. What we mean by a comprehensive ecosystem is that, of course, there are companies, users, buyers of technologies that are putting in place projects to benefit them, their operations, through augmented reality. They are currently doing research, they're piloting, and some are even implementing projects in production environments. To support the enterprises, we have the providers of software, hardware services. They are innovators, large and small, and they collaborate with their customers, of course, as well as with the non-commercial entities. These are research organizations primarily, but also educational organizations that are delivering new technologies, usually basic technologies for better AR experiences. So the ecosystem, the way the area is supporting it at present, is consisted of these three important segments. Next slide, please. So we facilitate the development and the interaction of these segments through a number of programs. Our website, these webinars, and our presentations at conferences and in other venues share our thought leadership, the thought leadership of our members. They have developed content, and the area is also creating content. We bring that all together in a vendor-neutral way, and that helps people get their information they're looking for more quickly and more reliably, get reliable information. In addition, we have different programs that facilitate networking, and we're developing a marketplace that will help members and the public, all those interested in enterprise AR, to find tools to share experiences and help each other. We are supporting programs to educate more professionals and to close what we call the skills gap. So we know that there is a shortage of people, professionals in enterprise augmented reality, so we're also working to increase the availability of professionals. And finally, through our committees, we are working on different ways of reducing the barriers to adoption. One of those committees is the Research Committee. And I'll tell you more about it on the next slide. Chris, can we go to the next slide? So the Research Committee organizes programs that help members overcome common barriers early in the process as well as they mature. And we do that through a directed research program. We work in partnership with the other committees. The Requirements Committee defines use cases and business scenarios where enterprise are using augmented reality, and then defines a set of requirements. We're doing that in partnership with the DMDII initiative and our members. It's a public resource run by the Requirements Committee. The third committee is closely working and studying the safety risks, and we are developing tools, including mitigation recommendations around the use of AR in the workplace. We know that safety is extremely important and could be an important barrier in the future when we go to full-scale deployments. Further, the cybersecurity risks are also a known barrier, and so the Security Committee is classifying the risks and studying different mitigation measures. Finally, we have a marketing committee that helps us to develop programs to promote the area as well as its members. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the research committee specifically is coordinating among the members the different priorities that members have, the different topics that are of interest to members. So we call for topics that members would like to have research done on, and then we select a research supplier. We solicit the research proposals, and then we select a supplier, engage with that supplier to conduct research and provide the deliverables to the area. And finally, once we have the results of the research, we disseminate those to our members and frequently to the wider ecosystem. We have already distributed two full reports to our members and some executive summaries to the public, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. Slide number 7, please. The 2 research projects we've done so far have been under the Area-Directed Research Program. And what that is, as mentioned, we call for members to propose topics. We have a democratic process for choosing the topic. We contract with a supplier, and we use the dues, the member fees, to financially to fund the research, and then the members receive the results. The 2 research projects that we've done so far, the first was on the subject of cybersecurity that was completed by Brainwave in the first half of 2017. And in the second half of 2017, we selected Strategy Analytics to help us study the return on investment questions. If you go to the next slide, please. The project that we contracted for with Strategy Analytics was to answer some questions that area members had about the measurement of ROI and to provide a greater structure, a framework for our members to be able to talk with their customers if they are provider members, or internally to a company so that a AR project manager could more clearly communicate with, for example, their CFO or other people with financial authority, and also to produce some best practices so that the decision makers internally and externally could better understand where their return on investment would come from and when. So to do this project, we had the pleasure of working with Chris Ambrosio. Chris, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Strategy Analytics. Why did the area choose your company?
Great. Thank you, Christine, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I am Chris Ambrosio. As Christine said, I'm the Vice President of Consulting here at Strategy Analytics. Strategy Analytics is well known in the syndicated research industry for the consumer research that we've done over the past. Not only that is kind of our foundational value do we have, but we've also got a broad range of capabilities looking at and benchmarking user experience, and then a range of syndicated services and consulting in a number of different technology markets. All of our analysts are looking at both consumer and B2B types of applications in a variety of markets that focus really center or orbit around the worlds of mobility, of digital content use, digital applications use in the home or in the enterprise, and the increasing world of electronics, semiconductor-enabled, cloud-connected business and service delivery. We also have, in our consulting practice that I head up, we work with our knowledge teams to provide a range of primary research looking at buyer needs, perceptions and brand preferences, marketing and positioning strategies in the B2B space. We also conduct a range of market analysis types of efforts and processes aimed at helping our customers in assessing and identifying opportunities, in sizing those opportunities, and then in understanding some of the competitive dynamics within the competitive environment, understanding shifts within the value chain, and then benchmarking some of competitor strategies and technologies that they use. Our work with Christine and with ARIA really came out of our expertise that we have in the areas of IoT and augmented reality. We have, for a number of years, been conducting analysis, primary research in looking at the end users' buying priorities, preferences, and their needs when they are implementing Internet of Things, connected solutions in the enterprise. We have focused that effort around manufacturing. We've looked in depth at markets like medical, healthcare, and transportation, and a range of other verticals that we've looked at the uses of connected applications and services, and also done some work in the area of augmented reality and how augmented reality and virtual reality are being used by businesses in these verticals in different use cases in different parts of their business. I think one of the other reasons that ARIA has worked with us is that we have for a long time been known as an independent, objective source for third-party research. We've done thought leadership work and white paper marketing types of research for a number of different organizations globally, as well as a number of large enterprise global types of corporations. So we're well known in this industry for providing this type of support. In our study that we provided for ARIA, we used a primary research methodology. So we interviewed a number of leading edge companies that are using augmented reality in their businesses. You see some of the participants here. Actually, Paul Davies, who will do a presentation here, part of the presentation later, and his team also participated in the study. These companies are really kind of on the bleeding edge of using augmented reality to improve their processes, whether it's product development through to manufacturing and service maintenance, et cetera. And we really wanted to understand, in understanding best practices and in building our calculator, we relied on these firms to give us some of the insights that they are gleaning in their early uses and deployments of augmented reality solutions. So in the area of when we think about some of the challenges behind conducting ROI analysis in the enterprise, one of the things we also tried to do here was to create an ROI model that allowed an organization to conduct ROI analysis given some of the unique challenges that they face. I think in the market today, it's very clear that there are some very large trends or drivers that are happening within the organization that are making it increasingly difficult to conduct ROI analysis. I think one of those big trends driving that difficulty is that just a whole shift, the transformation in the enterprise today towards digital. Companies are making significant investments in transitioning over into digital strategies. And that's really changing the fundamental approach that many companies use in their business model. Many times these companies are using agile development processes for these cloud-based services and for these business solutions. This is an iterative, ongoing type of a development process that makes it very, very challenging to conduct an ROI analysis in many instances when you think about technology investments and the use of augmented reality. Not only that, but because of some of these two shifts, there's an accelerating need among companies to accelerate that return on their investments. Because of the use of agile development processes, firms are needing to recover those investments faster. So there's pressure on firms to evaluate the effectiveness of their investments, and just these trends are all kind of coming together to make it much more difficult for companies to evaluate these investments. So when you think about some of the fundamental approaches to investing in augmented reality, augmented reality technology has some of those challenges around early stage types of technologies. When you think about the use of AR or even other comparable technologies that are early stage, like drone types of solutions or Internet of Things applications in general, you've got proprietary technologies, specifications, and technologies that are being used that are proprietary, or there's just a limited number of options for applications that can be used in the enterprise. What I mean by that is there may be a variety of applications deployed, but there's not a real prevalence of standards, of integration ready types of solutions. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in deploying these early technologies in the enterprise in order to make it effective. And though that type of investment, that early stage work required by an enterprise, makes it more challenging for companies to conduct ROI. So when we did our analysis here, when we built the model, we wanted to accomplish several things. As Christine said, we wanted to give business users the basic tools for conducting ROI analysis and the different elements or parts of ROI analysis. So when you think about business case analysis and analyzing your solution costs, total cost of ownership, et cetera, they're all parts, in part and parcel of ROI analysis. And we wanted to give users all of those fundamental pieces to use in preparing their analysis. We also wanted to create a framework that was customizable. We looked at, and I'll explain the case study a little bit more as we go on, but we really tried to create a framework that you could modify, and that with the support of Christine and the ARIA, that you could modify that to different use cases. And then finally, too, as Christine mentioned, we wanted to create a financial framework that was valid for executive decision makers and those financial experts, those accounting and finance experts that are at the decision making level. So when you think about net present value, when you think about the cost of capital, we wanted to account for some of those financial metrics as well to ensure that the model that we provided to ARIA members was something that they could use organizationally when they try to evaluate their return on investment.
That's right, Chris. I wanted to add that to my knowledge, this is the world's first business tool for financial analysts studying augmented reality. And in the next slide, we show a little bit of the structure of the calculator. This is, of course, an Excel spreadsheet, and it takes the user through these three different sections for the specific design of that company, the specifics of the business use, the use case, and the company's constraints, shall we say. And the parameters that are entered in the first three tabs or the first three worksheets then are processed through the calculations and give you the annual allocation and the estimated return on investment. This type of a tool permits people to get a rough view if they don't make any adjustments or an estimate, but then also it could really be customized. And I think, Chris, you're going to tell us a little bit more about the customization and how to use this type of a tool.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Thanks, Christine. I want to emphasize that the tool itself is actually a living, breathing Excel model. So you've got living inputs where, as you input your data, all of our formulas, all of the calculations are made for you when you start thinking about net present value, when you start looking at comparing cash flows. Effective ROI analysis really is a measure of how efficient companies are in managing those cash flows. So it becomes an exercise in identifying all of your net positive cash flows, which are the direct and indirect benefits of the augmented reality solution that it creates for the organization, and it's weighed against those negative cash flows. So the solution costs, and some of those elements where, obviously where cash flow is going out of the organization. So we try to put some in the model as well. We created the financial metrics that put around that. So when you think about tax rates, when you think about cost of capital, so you can look at the value of that money over time and look at net present value analysis to really get a full view of the real impact and implications for your organization. I want to emphasize too that in our model that we created for ARIA, this was really, I think we looked at it with Christine as a first step. Augmented reality in and of itself there are many, many use cases for augmented reality across the product lifecycle. We look at maintenance and repair operation in the model just for the sake of keeping the analysis focused. But we want to emphasize that we can customize the model. We can change the inputs in the business case. We can change and add elements in the solution cost sections of the model wherever needed to look at and evaluate investments in augmented reality in other parts of the life cycle, whether it's used in early stage development, research and development, or even design types of uses and applications. We can look at all the way through manufacturing and production uses, and we can modify the model too to look at how augmented reality solutions are used in the areas of sales and marketing applications or follow-on services. In this instance, we wanted to ensure that in looking at MRO, it was clear, and ARIA requested this, there are some clear impacts that can be measured in a maintenance and how augmented reality is used in a maintenance and repair operation. There are potential implications in terms of lost revenue and increase some significant metrics that you can look at in measuring efficiency or opportunity costs. There are also some areas where by implementing a connected augmented reality solution that enterprises can solve some significant challenges. Areas of where you have poor documentation, for example, or it's difficult to update and maintain manual types of processes that are very complex or lengthy. There are benefits in very clear benefits in how a wearable augmented reality application can help reduce that complexity and reduce the time required to perform repairs. So because of some of those advantages, and since it was a step one, we really wanted to try and focus on MRO because of some of those reasons. In our case study, as Christine mentioned, what we did to demonstrate the model itself was we prepared a fictitious case study of a company that in this instance was selling sterilization equipment for hospitals. They also, as a value-added service, they provide contract maintenance services to those hospitals or healthcare service providers. They maintain and service that equipment. They have hundreds of healthcare provider customers, and each customer, depending on the size, obviously healthcare organizations can be very large, could have anywhere from one or two to several dozen sterilizers throughout their facilities. So in our instance, in this example, the company was seeing there was an unsatisfactory metrics around the mean time between repairs for these healthcare providers. They were receiving a significant number of calls very frequently for repairs on the equipment, and the repairs were quite expensive to go out and perform. There was also what they felt was an unacceptable or an area where they could improve was in the area of time it takes to repair that equipment. When you think of mean time to repair the equipment, they thought that there was some time there that they could squeeze out by using an augmented reality solution, so they went ahead and evaluated that. I think when you think about augmented reality wearables in an MRO application, there are some benefits there that this technology brings. Obviously, eliminating the use of paper manuals and the time impacts or time inefficiencies that are required to do that. Also, the eliminating the use of other peripherals. If you have that data on a PC or on a tablet and it needs to be referenced and updated, you can eliminate some of that potential equipment as well. Also, being able in a connected application to access that content on site rather than having to transition back and forth between locations to get content and parts. There are things that an augmented reality solution can do there to make that more efficient. And then obviously some of those things in the area of enabling the use of visual schematics right on site as the technicians are diagnosing what is needed on the machinery and then how to repair that. Some of the benefits or the key metrics of MRO are shown there down in the box and below right, and that's one of the best practices to kind of come out of the study. When you're modeling and using an ROI model like this, organizations really need to have a firm grasp of what those core metrics are to their business and how they're calculated. That is not something that we try to accomplish in our model because of the diversity and complexity of that, how that changes from organization to organization. And that is one of the elements that companies need to do kind of beforehand to ensure that the ROI analysis is effective and that they can get organizational buy-in to the results of the ROI analysis on the AR technology. So in the business case, this is where many organizations, when they talk or refer to ROI analysis, what we found in our research that many times companies kind of orbit around the business case, and that they really, in many instances, ROI equates to how effectively you can demonstrate the productivity benefits or the advantages of the solution, and it doesn't really account for some of those financial metrics. We wanted obviously we wanted to create a model that did do a more robust financial analysis, but in our model, we also wanted to ensure that the model itself enabled you to perform a robust analysis of the business case itself. So we tried to create a pretty extensive, a pretty comprehensive business case analysis. There are sections within the model that allow you to identify the productivity improvements, both the direct benefits of users of the technology, as well as some of the indirect benefits that orbit around that technology. So reductions in time for technicians, reductions in times for things like order processing when you're able to send things directly through a connected solution, reductions or more efficiency in other users who are using that equipment or processing orders and peripheral administrative work around that equipment. There are indirect benefits to that as well, and the business case can account for that. Another element of business case analysis orbits around the increases in revenue, potential revenue increases or increases in profits. Remember, since ROI is based on cash flow analysis, profit is really, after taxes, after all your costs have been removed, you really want to understand what those profits are generated from that analysis. And in our model, we've created a business case that allows you to estimate that. Now, I want to emphasize about time efficiency, productivity, increase in profits from the use of an MRO application. There's an implied necessity here that for any organization to do this effectively, there really is a significant amount of work that needs to be done up front to get that to make sure that your ROI analysis is robust. So as I mentioned earlier, organizations want to or need to understand those business metrics, and not just understand it in an operational sense, but they need to validate that within the organization. So getting that buy-in from your finance, from your executive team, ensuring that everybody's on the same page in the metrics that you're using and how they're calculated, that's something that obviously goes beyond what we can do in an ROI analysis, but needs to be done for any firm wanting to evaluate the effectiveness of their investment. Not only that, but I think as Paul and as we'll talk to shortly, there are things like time and motion studies that need to be done, site evaluations, et cetera. So there's a lot of extra work here that needs to be done effectively for inputs to the ROI analysis. Those are the types of things that vendors will help with, companies like Upskill, and you also have organizations like ARIA and consulting companies that can help with that as well. There's a lot of resources out there on the web that can help you in estimating some of that. Obviously, though, you need to understand some of the impacts too in the areas of hardware and software costs and where those other potential savings are. And the model gives you inputs to understand all of those potential benefits that come from the solution. Of course, solution costs are an important part of that. So the model goes through in lengthy detail, outlining all of the software, hardware, and labor or professional service fees that might be associated with this investment. You can see some of those headings that we've just captured kind of at a summary level for you in the table there. And in our case study example, these are all evaluated as operational costs. These were not considered in our fictitious example as capital expenditures. These were operational costs. One of the important aspects of augmented reality technology and technology investments in general is how companies account for the digital costs that are associated with the solution, but may not be directly or may be utilized for other digital enablement within the organization. When you think about things like content adaptation costs, for example, the cost of transitioning your inventory from a manual system over into digital, or the cost of digitizing printed manuals over into a digital format. There are usually significant costs associated with that. So in our analysis and with ARIA, we work to help companies try to get that type of analysis done and to develop a strategy for how those costs are accounted for in your ROI analysis. Many times those costs can overwhelm the ROI analysis. So it's important that in the best practices work that we've seen, and in looking at companies like Boeing and some of the larger companies, it's clear that they have a digital strategy at a corporate level for how they plan and invest in digital enablement. So any one technology investment, like their augmented reality investments, don't have to bear the total cost for that digital enablement. When you have a corporate view, a corporate strategy like that in place, it can make performing that ROI analysis on any individual technology have a significant impact, a positive impact for companies. Now, we realize not all companies have that organized strategy at the corporate level, but many firms do have at least some sense, at the executive decision-making level, for how that digital strategy will play out across the organization. So it's important for successful ROI analysis that the analysis account for that in some way so that it doesn't detrimentally impact your results. And finally, I wanted to emphasize again that there is a financial metrics part of this. So you can modify or customize the model based on your region, your currency that you need, and the different tax basis that you might have in your country or in the region there, metropolitan allocations that you need to have there, as well as cost of capital allocations. You can change that based on your organization's cost of capital. In the model we created, we had just used the straight line depreciation method. You can change the model 3, 5, 7, 10 years based upon the time frames that you wanted to use. In our example, in our case study, we had a total of investment of 165,000 euro, which for the organization created a net annual benefit. This is just the positive cash flow of nearly 70,000 euros annually. It was a significantly high rate of return on their investment, over 40%. And I think one of those elements again was that those content adaptation costs were manageable because the company had a larger corporate strategy around digitization. You can also measure payback period and look at how long it will take you to recover your investment, and then compare some of those financial metrics that come out of the analysis around net present value and cumulative net benefit. So you see some of those metrics here that are extracted from the model, and we wanted to, again, there's quite a bit of inputs to this. We're able to customize that for you in any aspect of the model, really. Again, on the business case side and the solution costs, we're willing to work with you on that. So I will be attending AWE here next week with Christine and Mark and the ARIA team. So if there is some interest in discussing this or just in meeting and asking some questions, I'll be there. I'll be available to talk about that, and I'd be happy to meet with you.
Thanks, Chris.
So at this point, I think Christine had wanted to introduce Paul, and we'll
thank you very much.
Move in here. Let me pass over.
So very good treatment of all the things that we were able to do. This excellent project, and really appreciate your work. So
Thanks.
Let's see. So now we're going to, just to summarize, for those of you who may not be familiar or might not be terrifically clear, that the area members received the calculator as a spreadsheet, as well as an in-depth best practices report that answered the questions we sought to address. In addition, there was the case study, which Chris went over in detail, as well as a short abstract, a summary of the best practices that were described in the in-depth report. So, based on their own work at Boeing, Paul Davies is now going to tell us more about how return on investment is estimated and what impact it has on projects that he's working on. Paul, we look forward to hearing what you have to offer.
Sure. Thanks, Christine, and good morning or good afternoon to wherever you are. For a little background, my name is Paul Davies. I'm an Associate Technical Fellow with Boeing's Research and Technology Group. We call that BR&T, and BR&T is our centralized research and development technology organization where we work on a whole range of topics benefiting both our commercial and our defense business units. I've been developing or working in the augmented reality space for a little over 10 years now, and probably for the last 5 or 6 of those years, I've really been focused on the manufacturing or assembly use case of augmented reality. So I'll be framing most of my comments around that use case. And my most recent work, actually, Boeing announced and kind of went public with a few months ago, is on one of our twin aisle commercial platforms. And if folks want to see more about that, you can just look on the Boeing homepage, boeing.com, and look under innovation. And if you search for augmented reality, you'll see a story and a video of some of our more recent work. So I wanted to just provide a little context from our perspective on some of the challenges in generating an ROI or business case around implementing technologies on the production line. I think we've worked on this for a while. We've tried a few different types of ways of generating business cases, but the challenge always seems to be from producing the baseline, getting the baseline cost for a particular job or a sequence of jobs that you can then compare when you pilot a technology like augmented reality. The production line is a really complex place with a lot of external and internal factors that are exerting forces on it. Things like learning curve, where maybe we change a job or we introduce a new technique of doing something. So at the beginning, mechanics, need to learn that, and they may do the job a little slower or less effective. But as they get better at it over time, accounting for that in an ROI can be a challenge because it kind of happens kind of below the radar and subtly. It's difficult to quantify. Things like employee churn, people coming and leaving, changing programs, working on a different assembly line. People out sick, people then bringing in people who are not so familiar with the job. Those are all impacting factors that we would need to form the basis of any effective ROI study. Even when people do get familiar or proficient at a job, if a design change occurs or a process change occurs, that's going to kind of have a resetting effect on their abilities with the job. So we have to account for that. And even just having systems in place to kind of accurately track job times can sometimes be a challenge. In our MES manufacturing execution systems, we do have the ability and the processes are in place for us to, when jobs get started and when they're bought off and inspected, all those times can be tracked, but that kind of relies on the person, stepping off the airplane, going over to a workstation to enter that data on time, and that doesn't always happen. So getting accurate job time can be difficult. Some other factors, outside of the baseline, our industry, as others are fairly heavily regulated by the FAA and other governing bodies. So they provide requirements on what we do when we introduce new technologies. Sometimes we have to start with things we call shop aids, which means we have to practice the technology in parallel to an existing process. So if we're trying to quantify the impact of this technology, it's very difficult to do if we can't remove a parallel process or something we're trying to replace initially. For instance, if we're trying to replace a paper drawing with an augmented reality system, in a shop aid, we may not be permitted to remove the paper drawing at first. So although they may have access to the augmented reality, they're still using the paper drawing as their baseline. So it's kind of difficult to gauge the effect of that on the business case. And then sometimes, we have to think about, is it augmented reality, or is it a kind of a similar or a partner technology that is causing some of those gains? For instance, is it the fact that we're spatially overlaying a work instruction, or is it just the fact that the mechanic has access to the work instruction at his point of view instead of off the airplane? So we have to think about what's the kind of the root cause of any gains that we're seeing. And then one of the much more difficult things to track is the indirect benefits that Chris had mentioned in his remarks. Things like if we're generating less traveled work, less rework, we're doing the job right the first time. The effect of the downstream effect of less management of traveled work becomes extremely difficult to track because there's a lot of people that get involved in travel work, and trying to capture all that is extremely difficult. So those are some of the challenges we do have, but of course we do need to do business case studies. those are the ways we get our internal projects funded. There's a couple of ways we've done it in the past. We've looked at a common technique is to what we call a factory observations sheet. Is to fill out factory observation sheet. That would entail somebody like myself or another technician to go down to the factory and actually just spend a shift with a mechanic and just track what he's doing with his time and put that into categories. So we might say, okay, we're spending a certain percentage of time on looking at work instructions, a certain percentage of time and stepping off the airplane looking at a 3D model or something like that. And then we can try and get a baseline of where the mechanic is spending his time, and then look at where augmented reality might be able to reduce some of the areas where we think we're spending time less effectively. We use what we call the bar time for baseline. So bar times are times that manufacturing engineers have planned for a job, for a particular job. We're moving to a process called standard work, where all of our jobs should be towards around the 2 to 3 hour mark. So when we do our time studies in the factory and develop our use cases, we compare the bar time with traditional data, historical data on job time for that job. And then when we implement a pilot, we look at comparing the new job time to the bar time and the traditional time, and try to form as good a picture as we can to do on the impact of the technology. And then finally, I wanted to just kind of mention that as Boeing, as a large company, we produce a lot of diverse products in the aerospace realm. There's a lot of technology that goes into this thing. So when we propose projects, and I've proposed many augmented reality solutions over the years, we're competing with a whole range of technologies, in composites, structures, automation, fluids, all kinds of things. And the company typically looks at where can we get the most impact for our R&D dollars, and that may not be in if the business case for augmented reality doesn't close as well as say a fluid project, then that's going to be a problem. So getting a solid business case up front in our proposal is really key. Just to kind of wrap up and close, I think you can see that at work in our wiring example I talked about at the beginning on one of our programs. Wiring has turned out to be a really actually effective use case for augmented reality, showing 3D wiring models and drawings spatially registered over an aircraft has kind of emerged as a common theme, where the business case, actually, the ones we've done internally, have closed very strongly. And I think we're going to see a lot more use cases around wiring, at least in the next few years going forward. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope that was provided a little bit of context to some of the discussion here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul. We'll be discussing this more amongst ourselves and in just a minute. But first, let's hear from Jay Kim. Jay, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then walk us through these slides?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. And good day, everyone, since I can't tell whether or not people are in the morning or in the afternoon. But, I'm with a company called Upskill, which is a software company that works with some of the largest companies in the world, including Boeing, to be able to go and bring in augmented reality in the wearable form to what we call the post-design product lifecycle of large industrial organizations. But put in simpler terms, what this means is that we target job roles that are doing 3 high-level things: people that are building, moving, or servicing things. So recognizing that there is an increasing role that on the design side of things, we really focus on after the design, when those products actually end up getting made, and all of the different processes around that life cycle. And as we engage with our customers around starting projects, being able to go and determine an ROI model is absolutely key to ensuring success for the customer, and frankly also us as a provider in the AR industry. And we target essentially 5 variables, and I'll point out the ones that are most critical for us to be able to go and get our customers to invest. and move forward towards a scale deployment of the solution. The first, and this has already been talked about, is just can you work more? What is your throughput associated with the work that you're looking to do? And there are multiple ways to go and measure that. The second one is around quality, and particularly around being able to go and do things right the first time. And as you'll see, quality ends up becoming important, not just in manufacturing applications. I think the term quality may elicit, something that is more on the manufacturing side, but it spans across all the different applications. Being able to go and do things right the first time, every single time, has implications in the reduction of rework, which is where a lot of the savings around augmented reality and digital applications in general come in. The second one is being able to drive, or the third variable is around compliance. Being able to go, particularly in regulated industries such as aerospace, utilities, and biopharma, being able to go and ensure that you're being compliant with the different processes that your local regulators have set forth is absolutely critical in being able to ensure that you're not incurring unexpected expenses in rework once again, or in regulatory fines. The fourth variable is around safety. And safety is a little bit more difficult to try and quantify because a lot of the returns around it can be very qualitative rather than quantitative, but it is one of the metrics that a lot of our customers ask us to go and track in various ways. And last but not least is being able to better utilize your workforce. So Christine mentioned early on about how AR is addressing the skills gap, and being able to go and have democratic access to knowledge, as well as enabling people to become more agile above and beyond the tasks that they may be trained for, is another key variable that we target. So let's talk about how that is being analyzed. And really, at the end of the day, if you can't go and build a business case around either throughput or quality, or perhaps both, then I'll put it bluntly that there is no business case around AR that you can go and drive to. It is still an early market, and you have to be able to go and have a laser focus around those two metrics. Everything else is it's kind of gravy. So how do we actually analyze those two variables in the first order? The first, on the throughput side, is being able to go and do time and motion studies. Time, as Paul outlined, can be also difficult to measure depending on the work environment, but this is an area where we have invested a lot of time and resources to be able to better instrument the different business processes that are being enhanced by augmented reality, so that we can go and get that data, even using our software platform. And there are others that are using different methods to be able to do something similar. At the same time, we've also posted a number of different time and motion videos where we set the baseline on the left side, and we set the augmented reality enabled processes on the right side, and the difference is very, very obvious. In this particular picture, you see that person that's going back to the computer to be able to go and look up the information, whereas the person on the right is able to go and consume that information on a wearable device. So time can be indeed difficult to try and measure, but with proper instrumentation, you're actually able to go and get more insights into how work is being done in the first place. The second piece is around quality, and quality is an easy one because every single business that is worth its worth anything has a mechanism in being able to go and manage quality. So being able to go and simply see the outcome of a particular step in the process, and being able to look at quality improvements, which in turn again translates into a reduction of rework and reduction of scrap and other variables that were mentioned in our ROI calculator, is critically important. expanding into the next slide, which talks about some of the cost of ownership associated with it as we go and engage with our customers. You have the components that Chris identified earlier on. But the fourth one here that I wanted to go and mention was around training and the time that it is businesses spend to be able to go and actually using and working with the devices, as well as UIT and support personnel who now have to go and support some of these elements. But if you look at these four blocks in gray as the cost that the businesses often have to go and pay either upfront or pay a third vendor. After the solution has been deployed, there's also there are two additional components that become apparent, and one is around operations and maintenance support. And that is often a cost that is incurred directly by the customer by either paying their IT organization or finance organization and being able to just simply go and maintain the system. And then the second bit is around upgrades. How do you go and take the existing system and keep up with all of the latest and greatest around the technology? And that could very well mean investment into the four blocks that you saw above. But put it into simple terms, the total cost of ownership is a variable that a lot of our customers are starting to become more informed about, and it's a critical component, and also vendor selection around folks that are able to go and lower the different costs around each of these different blocks. And I think that's an important variable to consider, especially around the applications where the business case is strong and you're considering deployment into the mainstream operations.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Those are great remarks. Really a lot of insights for our participants on the webinar today. We just have a couple minutes left. I've received some questions, and those of you who have posted questions, we will follow up with you in writing. We have those recorded. But one that seems to me to be pretty universal is around preparing for the first time you do this return on investment. Once you've got the system figured out, it seems like repeating it, modifying, updating it is clear. It's just like any other business process. But the very, very first time one goes in doing this, what are the one or two items that you really need to have correct? Things, I mean, is a time and motion study the most important thing to do if it's your very first ROI assessment? Or is there something else?
I'll start with this and would invite Chris and Paul to follow. I think the easiest thing to measure often is time, and it also is it doesn't take a lot of time to try and measure time. So we often encourage our customers to start with the time and motion study after the user has become familiar with the technology. But quality also could be, especially in systems where you have a lot of quality control systems that are already in place, that's also a very good variable to track, which is why I mentioned those two in the first place.
Thank you, Jay. Paul, do you have any suggestions about?
Yeah, I would generally agree with Jay. I think in my experience, quality, so time and quality are the two big hitters, and getting the baseline correct, so you can build your business case around it is the most important thing you can do. I think in my experience, quality sometimes can be a little easier to track because it's a little more quantifiable to get your hands around the total picture. When I made my remarks, time can be a difficult thing when you want to add up everyone's time and all the different roles that are supporting production that may change when we introduce technology. Quality is, I think, sometimes easier to track metrics-wise in MES. Inspectors buy up for a certain percentage of jobs. Sometimes easier to get the big picture, but getting those two accurately documented is critical.
Chris, did you hear some best practices from the companies you interviewed that you could share with us?
Sure. I think Jay and Paul hit it right on the head with some of those practical concerns. I think the only thing I would add would be that what Paul hinted to there was getting the baseline correct is important. I think what we saw in the research is that many times that understanding, the baseline understanding of the impact to the business is intuitive. But these guys know the business inside and out. They know how it works, so they sense that those metrics, there's potential there. But validating that, making sure that those underlying metrics, how they're calculated, is robust and bought into by the decision-making team. I think doing your homework ahead of time it kind of helps you ensure that there's buy-in to the outputs at the end.
Okay. I think I'd like to just summarize then some of the things that you said, Chris, and that were brought out in the best practices report, having to do with digital readiness and transformation, good in-depth knowledge of the use case and the metrics that one uses to measure that use case. You also talked, Chris, about how to get the champion and the end users involved in this process of understanding all the metrics and understanding the factors, including, as Jay pointed out, the total cost of ownership. These are all together part of the equation. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Thank you very much for your participation. Just to remind you, this was a webinar of the Area Research Committee describing to you the ROI report, best practices report, and the calculator. You can download the executive summary and the full case study that Chris prepared from our website. So please don't hesitate to go over to see the area.org and into the resources area under the resources tab. Thank you very much for your attention and to our panelists. And this webinar will be on our YouTube channel in a few days. So if you'd like to share it with others, you're welcome to do so. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye now.